Newswatch magazine presents the analysis of world news in the light of Bible prophecy with David J. Smith.
The Almighty God, which created heaven and earth, has a plan for the human race. There is another being, though, who has rebelled against God and his rule long ago. This angel's name was Lucifer to begin with. He covered the very throne of God, overshadowed them. But then he fell. He sinned. His name was changed to fit the crime which he had committed of rebellion. His name was changed to that of Satan, meaning the adversary. God's prophets of old all wrote about a coming kingdom of God that is going to be established on planet Earth. This kingdom would never be destroyed because those ruling it under the authority of Jesus Christ would have a glorified, immortal body. They could not die. They cannot be assassinated. That kingdom will rule the world and bring it peace, prosperity, happiness. Everything good that the human race has ever desired, that is what is going to be brought to this planet. Satan is a great counterfeiter. He's always longed to rule the world with complete control. In Luke chapter 4, verse 5 and 6, Jesus Christ made it very clear as he was being tempted by Satan that Satan was delegated authority to rule, delegated in this age to rule over mankind. His job is to deceive, to make sure the human race stays under deception in hopes that they will not revive, they will not be saved as the plan of God is laid down. Jesus refused when he was being tempted to bow down and worship this person called Satan. He didn't want to be elevated to world king in that day. Satan found others, because he had been delegated authority, that would worship him. They would receive riches, power, control, world domination as a direct result of the worshiping the God of this world, who is no God but a fallen angel. There is one fact that every one of us can determine by going to encyclopedias, especially the Encyclopedia Britannica. There was the order of the Illuminati that was founded on May 1st, 1776 by a Dr. Adam Weishaupt. He was professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria, Germany. It's very important that we clarify the real meaning of Weishaupt's secret society, the Illuminati. The name implies that those individuals who has accepted the enlightenment from Satan or Lucifer would be the best qualified to rule the world, to dominate the human race, to provide education, to govern. They would be called the intelligentsia of the world. They would be the only people with the mental capacity, the knowledge, the insight, and understanding that is necessary to govern the world and bring it peace, ultimately. Their avowed purpose was that of a new world order, or as it is placed on the back of the $1 bill, the United States currency, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means a new secular order of the ages. So this is a fact of history. It can be demonstrated. It can be documented. This society exists. They said that if they ever became suspicious and came under the scrutiny of the authorities, they were to hide who they really were by going underground. The only way that you can trace their movements is to find groups or organizations working toward the same goal as the Illuminati, as it was laid down originally. The destruction of national sovereignty, the establishment of a world government, a Novus Ordo Seclorum. In 1829, there was an American illuminist sponsored a series of meetings in New York City. Frances Wright was her name. She advocated the entire Adam Weishaupt program of her auxiliary of the Order of the Illuminati, and included for the first time the word communism, and that it would be more acceptable to the masses of society if they used such phrases as equal opportunity, which is heard in the 21st century everywhere. It would be more acceptable if they would adopt slogans such as equal rights. Remember, this was 1829. They advocated atheism to be the seen enemy against a Christian society, opposites coming into conflict with one another. They also advocated at this meeting in New York in 1829 the emancipation of women, get them out of the home, put them in the workforce so that it would keep them away from their children, and the state eventually would be able to rule and train their children. Then they also call for free love. No such thing as marriage that would bind them together and make you responsible to your one husband or one wife. Those present were informed for the first time that the Illuminati intended to unite all atheist groups, nihilists, all of these organizations that are subversive to nations in which they resided. They would be organized under the name of communism. It would be the seen enemy, a destructive force that would be used to foment future wars and revolutions, to prepare the world for the revolution of the ages that eventually would take over the entire world and rule it under their god, Lucifer, who is no god. Clinton Roosevelt, a direct ancestor of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was one of those, along with Charles Dana and Horace Greeley. They were all appointed to be the committee to raise funds for this undertaking in the American continent. So they set their mind in motion. In 1830, Adam Weishaupt died at the age of 82. In 1834, Giuseppe Mazzini, the Italian revolutionary leader, was appointed to lead and head up the Illuminati, their revolutionary program around the world. He held that position till he died in 1872. This is all introduction into the message today, laying a groundwork as to what you see around you today. At about this time, a very obscure intellectual by the name of Moses Mordecai Marx Levy, alias Karl Marx, joined one of the Illuminati's sub-organizations called the League of the Just. In 1847, he was hired to write or rehash the old writings of Adam Weishaupt into what is called the Communist Manifesto. Basically, the Communist Manifesto was nothing but a policy statement that would lay down the plan for revolutionary wars and eventually taking over the entire world for Lucifer. Remember, Lucifer is the adversary of God. He's the opposer of Jesus Christ and God the Father. Everything that is good comes from God, but everything that is evil comes from Satan, the very one that they worship in secret, even though openly they claim to be atheist. They have created atheism in the masses' minds, but those in the upper echelon worship Lucifer by name. The next important person to come on the scene and emerge as one of the leaders of the Illuminati, especially in the United States of America, was a man by the name of Albert Pike. He was selected by Giuseppe Mazzini to lead their operations in the United States of America. As top illuminist, Mazzini and Pike worked together. They always communicated. Pike took control of the religious side of their operations worldwide, while Giuseppe Mazzini was in charge of the revolutionary side. Back then, when the Grand Orient Lodges of Freemasonry became suspect in Europe as a direct result of Mazzini's revolutionary activities, Mazzini presented a plan, a master plan, to Albert Pike. Albert Pike, by this time, had become worldwide head of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. In this letter by Albert Pike, or to Albert Pike, from Giuseppe Mazzini, dated January 22nd, 1870, he wrote, and I quote, "We must allow all the federations," this is Masonic federations, "to continue just as they are, with their systems, their central authorities, their diverse modes of correspondence between high grades of the same rite, organized as they are at present, but we must create a super rite, which will remain unknown, to which we will call those Masons of high degree, whom we shall select." So it is those that are hand-selected by those that are at the very top echelon of the Illuminati. And he went on to say, as a direct result of this ultra-secrecy, they will hand down orders and nobody will know where they've come from, because the Palladian Rite will be unknown to the lesser Masons. You couldn't tell somebody in Freemasonry any of this because they have not done their homework, they have not studied, they have not found out who is behind the drive for world government today. Albert Pike organized this ultra-secret organization under the name of the New and Reformed Palladian Rite. He established 3 supreme councils, one in Charleston, South Carolina, one in Rome, Italy, the other in Berlin, Germany. There was a historian, Dr. Batelli, from France. He wrote, quote, "This super rite, which is Masonic Luciferian Spiritism, must not be confused with the machinery of high masonry. Palladism is the cult of Satan in the inner shrines of a rite superimposed on all other rites. It is a cult, a religion," end of quote. One of Albert Pike's most famous works was his writing of 861-page Morals and Dogma. He published it in 1871. He tells all the program in which they were going to lay down for world government. He said that when all the forces are combined, that's these world revolutionaries, and guided by the intellect, and anyone that knew or has studied into it knows that that means the Illuminati, the top echelon, and then regulated by the rule of law, justice would eventually come. He said then the great revolution prepared for by the ages will begin to march. It began to march, all right, with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 to 1919. Now I'm laying the groundwork to make sure you understand that it is Lucifer, it is Satan, the devil, that is in charge, because in Revelation 13, verse 2 and 3, it talks about the person that is in charge, that is giving rise to this world system. That great red dragon, Satan. And if we do not believe that he exists and he has authority to rule in the nations of men, we are of all people most blind. The theological or religious dogma of Albert Pike was laid down in what he termed the instructions. It was July 14th, 1889, and he sent these instructions to the 23 councils, supreme councils of the world. He said in there, we must tell those in Freemasonry that we worship a God. He said you can tell those of the 32nd degree, the 31st, and the 30th, all the way down, that we worship a God. but we can't tell them which God it is. He said the Masonic religion should be by all the initiates of the high degrees maintained in the pure doctrine of Luciferianism. So he's laid it down. He went ahead in his instructions. I'll not tell all of it, but he said, yes, Lucifer is God. They are working for Lucifer, Satan, the devil, to bring about a world government. They admit that Jesus Christ is also God, but they twist everything and turn it around backwards. They say Jesus is the God of darkness and he hates mankind. Just look around the world. And they said Lucifer is the God of light, and one day he will take over and destroy the God of darkness. And then, for the first time, the human race would be free from superstition. When we understand who is behind it, then we can look around and see, and everything becomes clear. There's no longer blinders on our eyes to see what the red horse of the apocalypse of the book of Revelation really is. When we understand who is behind it, who is giving it power. There was a very remarkable letter that was written on August 15th, 1871. It was on display in the British Museum Library in London, England, till about 1977. And it was Giuseppe Mazzini giving details to Albert Pike of how they were going to take the world. They said once we connect all of these organizations, the nihilists, the atheists, and so on, then we will begin to have revolutionary wars in various nations all over the world. Then he said we must have 2 world wars at least, and a third if absolutely necessary. But notice what he said concerning what would be happening at the very close of the age, if it was necessary. He said we, that's the Illuminati, worshippers of Lucifer or Satan, shall unleash the nihilist and atheist, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm in which all the horror will clearly show to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, which is the origin of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. Why? Because they teach evolution, that you and I are nothing but animals, and it's the survival of the fittest. So they can kill human beings, and they're not humans. They're just animals that were not superior with DNA patterns or genetic makeup. They were the weak ones in society. Then he went on and said, then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate these destroyers of civilization. But he said something else that is awfully important. He said the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, and they won't know where to turn. They won't know because they won't believe in God anymore. They have been inundated with evolution. There is no God. We evolved from a little tiny single cell nothingness in a pool of slime somewhere. And so they will undermine everybody's belief in the true and the living God, that God does not mean it when he gives his commandments in the Bible and says live by them. Then he went on to say that when this great war comes, the pure doctrine of Lucifer will be brought out into the light for the first time, and it will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and eliminated at the same time. So there is a battle to the death with Christianity and atheism. They never change. They retreat 2 steps when they're caught and then move forward 1 more step and another step until finally they're confronted again. But they want world government. Notice what it says in Revelation 6, verse 3 and 4. When he, and this is talking about Jesus, had opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse. Yes, another one in addition to the white horse, that was red. And power was given to him that sat thereon. Why? What was the purpose? To take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and that there was given unto him a great sword. That's a military arsenal. So notice the importance of what was just read right out of the Bible. 3 features that this red horse must meet. And it's called the red horse of the apocalypse. This is Satan behind the rise of this red horse. Number 1, its purpose is to take peace from the earth. Have we seen revolutionary wars since the overthrow of the Tsar of Russia? Starting around World War II. Prior to that is when the infiltration started, but they got in full gear by World War II. In other words, they are to destabilize governments from one end of the earth to the other to prepare it for their world government. A second purpose of this red horse was to kill. When you look at everything the international communistic movement has done, you will see that it is the greatest killer that has ever existed in human history. Thirdly, it was to be given or furnished by someone with a great supply of military equipment to accomplish the first 2 purposes of taking peace from the earth and killing human beings. Is there any political movement that uses these methods in their tactics to drive for world government today? Has there been since 1917 to 1919 with the overthrow of the Tsar of Russia? They had a plan. They laid it bare. Number 1, they said they wanted to abolish all kings. They called it the monarchy. And all ordered government in every nation that they could infiltrate, undermine, destabilize, overthrow, and usurp the governmental power. Secondly, they would abolish all private property. No one would own anything, just like in Russia today. Thirdly, they said they would abolish all inheritance so that the middle class will disappear. You can't hand down wealth from one generation to another. Fourth, they wanted to abolish patriotism. They had to undermine patriotism in every nation so they could merge it into a global government. So what have we seen in the 21st century? There is a plan and a plot to undermine patriotism. They've come out with movies. Anyone who is a patriot is an idiot. They're trying to blow up the world. They're trying to unleash chemical warfares. They're fighting the government. Number 5, they wanted to abolish the family with one man and one woman. So they had to start having the promotion of John and Bill as a unit, or maybe Sarah and Ruth as a unit. That way you can't have children. You will slow down the population race. Then a 6th point, they wanted to abolish all religion to prepare the world to accept Lucifer as God. And 7th, when all these preparatory stages have been accomplished, they will create their one world government. Anyone who has been watching and who understands these things can see very clearly these are happening before our eyes. In 1919, and remember this is still introduction, in 1919, after the Bolshevik Revolution, the communist rules for revolution were found, discovered. They said they wanted to get everybody in the West that claimed to be Christian. They wanted to corrupt the young people by getting them away from religion, turning them to pornography, which creates a situation where if you're a married person, that's adultery of the heart. It wanted to get them interested in sex. They wanted to make them superficial and not rugged anymore. Then they wanted to get control of all means of publicity. They do it. They have their talk shows 24 hours a day. Then you have the conservative on one side. You have the liberal on the other side. Confusion reigns everywhere. They wanted to encourage extravagant spending. CNN, Lou Dobbs show between 5 and 6 p.m. Central Standard Time stated in the week of November 18th, 19th, somewhere in there, they said that President George W. Bush has now become the greatest spender of anyone in the history of the world. But he's billed as a conservative. This is the doublespeak that they promote. They wanted to seize power as quickly as they can, but always preach freedom, democracy. And then when you get into control, you pass legislation to enslave to where pretty soon you become a socialist, communist nation and don't even know how it happened. And a third point they wanted was under some pretense, cause the registration of all firearms so that they could eventually, under some pretense, confiscate them and leave the population unarmed. This means the people would be helpless to fight against tyranny, those who so wanted to. These people who infiltrate in secret are called Fabian socialists into our government. It is these infiltrators who are at work behind the scenes by passing legislation to supply the red horse of the apocalypse from the United States of America, Great Britain, and it has been many European multinational corporations. The red horse is given a military arsenal. It does not have it on its own. It didn't have the capability of producing one. It didn't have the technical know-how. They couldn't build anything. It's like if I stand still and Brenda wants to throw a cup at me. As long as I stand still, I'll never be hit. And that's the way it is with the Russians. You stand still, country, and they'll hit Cuba or they'll hit the North Pole, but their guided missiles could not hit you. That's how bad they were until enter the United States of America. Albert Pike, who was head of worldwide ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, wrote a very remarkable letter on August 15th, 1871. And he said, gave all the details that I mentioned already. And everything has lined up exactly as he said. They've had 2 world wars, World War I. During World War I, they overthrew Russia, the Tsar. They set up the seen enemy of the West. They claimed to be atheist, exactly as they said. Then, after World War II, by beginning to use supplies by the United States surplus to arm Russia to fight a seen enemy, Germany. Then all of a sudden, Russia had a military, marched right in to Berlin, Germany. But in the meantime, they took 10 or 11 East European nations under their control. The Illuminati, V.I. Lenin, when he overthrew, and his gang, the Russians, they said that they had a plan that they had to work out. This is in addition to Albert Pike, and I'm still laying the groundwork for the message. He said, first of all, we'll take Eastern Europe, then the masses of Asia. So during World War II, with the military aid of the United States supplying Russia's army, they marched in and took 10 or 11 countries in Eastern Europe, just like V.I. Lenin said in 1921. They then said, we will take the masses of Asia. They had already been supplying with United States equipment that they received during World War II, supplies militarily to Mao Zedong, China. Our State Department cut off all supplies to our staunch ally, head of the Chinese government at that time, and so it was. The masses of Asia, the most populous nation, China, became communist. And then they said, we will surround the United States. It'll be the last bastion of capitalism. We won't have to attack it, at least hopefully. It will fall like a ripe fruit into our hands. Have we seen the surrounding of the United States with Cuba, Nicaragua, San Salvador? Have we seen Venezuela turn communist? Chile was the only one that was not a Marxist government, a leader in that country, and now it is ungovernable, so they may end up with a Marxist leader after all. That means everybody south of the Rio Grande River will be a Marxist nation. Everyone, with no exception. What do we have to our north? Canada. Skin color just like yours, just like mine. They talk a little funny, but they have an accent like in Britain. I couldn't understand a thing they said. But they're a socialist country and becoming hardcore socialist. They're working for world government, and the United States is now surrounded. Our military is away from the country. It's involved in something else. So in the 1930s, this is before they had ever taken the Eastern Europe, the first phase of Lenin's plan. They laid down their final program just in case the United States did not fall. In case we woke up as a nation. That program was laid down by Dmitry Manuelitsky at the Lenin School of Political Warfare, located in Moscow. He said that war to the hilt between communism and capitalism is inevitable. Today, that was the mid-1930s. We're not strong enough to attack. He said, our time will come. Yes, it'll come. And then he went on to say, to win, we will need the element of surprise. The Western world will have to be put to sleep. They'll have to be taught communism is dead. They've reverted to a market society. They're not a threat to us anymore. So we shall begin by launching the most spectacular peace movement on record. The Berlin Wall came tumbling down. East and West Germany merged together. A communist sector merged with a capitalist sector. This was very, very outgoing. It was spectacular. Then they put on an orchestrated show for us. And so Mikhail Gorbachev, head of the KGB at one time, and then the highest official in the land of Russia, decided we'll let Boris Yeltsin take over, and he will be the one to fool the West, to make them think communism is dead. And that hardliner, talking about himself, will go to the United States. Then from that period of time on, we will have electrifying overtures and unheard of concessions. So what did they do? They announced that the satellite countries surrounding Russia were now free. But the documentation showed that every single leader was a former KGB agent, a head of the Communist Party in that country, so nothing changed. Just something for the news media in the West to put into the minds of you and me and everybody like us all over the country. Here's what they think about us. They said the capitalist countries, stupid and decadent, will rejoice to cooperate to their own destruction. Now remember, they're supposed to be friends. We're trading with the most vile of governments on earth, communist governments. We're transferring our entire economic manufacturing base to Mexico, and over 400 corporations to China, and probably General Motors will be the next to go to communist China. So they're becoming the economic powerhouses of the world, and we are eliminating the middle class. Just like V.I. Lenin said, we've got to get rid of the manufacturing base, eliminate the middle class in America so that we can be comfortably merged together. Because there is no middle class, only slaves in Russia and all communist countries. So he went on in his concluding statement and said, those stupid and decadent Americans that would rather go to the football games, nothing wrong with football, basketball games, be absorbed in them all the time, never look at your government and see what's happening. They'd rather go to the bars, the strip shows, and everything else because they're now decadent. We have undermined them. They will leap at another chance to be friends, just another place to sell our products. As soon as their guard, meaning their military, is down, we will smash them with our clenched fist. End of quote. Is communism dead? Every single program they've ever laid down in the history of the world, every statement they made as policy is still being perfected in their minds. Just like J. Edgar Hoover wrote in a book called Masters of Deceit. They say one thing to Americans, but it's with forked tongue. It's called double speak. They don't mean it. It's just to deceive us so that we won't think that we or they are our enemies anymore. Political imperialism is exactly what Russia has been engaged in for a long, long time. At one time, before infiltration was complete, the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, called the AFL-CIO, published a booklet back in June of 1971, said, "Who is the imperialist?" They went down the line and they showed nation after nation that had been overthrown, subverted, and gone behind the iron or the bamboo curtain. It was millions and millions upon millions of people. Romania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Northeast Prussia, and Germany, Eastern Czechoslovakia, Poland, the Finnish provinces, Tanutuva, Some former Japanese possessions before World War II went into the communist orbit. Then they went on and showed how Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Cuba, East Germany, of course, they were used to show this great, great, wonderful friendliness and turn them back to a free society. Hungary, Poland, Romania, Outer Mongolia, North Korea, North Vietnam, all of these went to communism. Then China. And once China went, Cambodia, Laos, then on the African continent, Angola, Mozambique, Ethiopia, and every single one of those Arab countries receive aid from communist Russia to fight the United States of America. So control of some of the countries may not appear to be there, but it's disguised. It really is there. To be exact, when the Hungarian people in 1959 wanted the United States to come to their aid, they were rebelling. All they had was sticks and stones. They called for the United States to bring in tanks and guns and soldiers, but we didn't. The Russians did. Force them back into the Russian orbit. Well, of course they did, because there is a Brezhnev doctrine that has been laid down saying that any communist country, once it falls into the communist orbit, must remain there at all times and never given its freedom. And so it is with this Brezhnev doctrine in place. No country can ever come out from behind the iron or the bamboo curtain. The imperialist appetite of communism is insatiable. They cannot do anything but try to deceive all the peoples of the world and bring them into an all-powerful one-world government. In order to do that, the countries they cannot infiltrate and overthrow, they must have a military arsenal to do it. Since they didn't have the manufacturing base, they had to have it imported into their country. They had to have someone, technicians, to come and teach them how to use it. The worldwide victory of the new social system, they went on ranting and raving, is forged in the fraternal mutual assistance and camaraderie, cooperation of the socialist states. This is Brezhnev's doctrine. The prototype of the future international association of all peoples of the planet is being molded today. Translated, everybody on earth is in danger, every country, of falling to the international communist orbit. They will not slow down. They will only take a couple of steps backwards, but they will go forward as swiftly and effectively as they can. In Revelation 6, once again, verse 3 and 4, communism kills. It says, and there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword, a great military arsenal. So the record of killing by the international communist movement is crystal clear. The United States Senate Internal Security Subcommittee came to a conclusion after years of investigation that in the former Soviet Union, just Russia alone, when they overthrew that country, they killed between 35 and 45 million people, and many since that time. That was only up until 1970. And then in communist China, they estimated anywhere between 34 and 62.5 million people up until 1970. But one of the goals the communists were trying to achieve, there was 45 of them. One of them was that they would dismantle the Senate Subcommittee on Un-American Activities so they could not investigate communism anymore. There were two former Soviet agents who left that country. They said the killings continue, and it's all by the authority of the Soviet government. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I could say that before I started. I practiced it. Solzhenitsyn, and another man by the name of Ussr. He said that there were mass killings. His own father is one who raided. He wrote a book, The Time of Stalin, Portrait of a Tyranny. He said that the numbers by the West were vastly lower than they really were. There was over 100 million people who have died. That was to 1970. That's been a long time ago. How many more dissenters have died? But there must be someone that is supplying all of this military to them. The Bible is accurate. It never fails. It said that someone will provide and give to them this great military arsenal. Trotsky and Lenin were trained in New York City's East Side. They were financed by international bankers. While they never worked, they stayed in the most fancy hotels, all bills paid for them. One such man was Jacob Schiff, who plunged $20 million of his own money to overthrow Russia for communism. That was a lot of money back in those days, 1917, 18, and 19. And so it was. Lenin and Trotsky, along with some of his men, were sent through Germany in sealed boxcars to Russia. The first Federal Reserve System chairman, by the name of Paul Warburg in America, had a brother named Max Warburg. He was in high command in Germany. He arranged for these people to go through the sealed boxcars into Russia. The financial backing for the overthrow by the Bolsheviks came from international bankers in the United States and in Europe. And along with Lenin and Trotsky's trained guerrillas, they unleashed horror upon the Tsar of Russia and his people. The Russian army was engaged in World War I. They couldn't protect the palace and the royal family, and so they were easy pickings for the Bolsheviks, who had been supplied with millions of dollars and military equipment. The plan of the Illuminati was to use Russia as the base of operations for worldwide revolutionary activities. In order for communism to be the destructive force to overthrow nation states for socialism, it had to have economic backing. That backing came from those who control the Federal Reserve System in America and the central banks of Europe, by charging interest to those nations for every dollar that came into existence. Then the money from that would be used as governments paid the interest but never the principal. It would be used to furnish this great military red horse of the apocalypse. V.I. Lenin, who was the very first ruthless dictator of the proletariat, as he called himself, laid down the pattern of revolution that Albert Pike had foretold in his August 15, 1871 letter to Giuseppe Mazzini. Lenin said, first we'll take Eastern Europe, then the masses of Asia, then we'll surround the United States. If resistance came from the United States, we would have a surprise military attack to overcome it. Have Lenin and his successors achieved their goals? Let's examine the record just for a moment. Russia fell in 1917 to 1919. The Bolshevik government could not have survived without outside help from the United States and Europe. Once Russia stabilized its economy and its control over the people, they overthrew Mongolia in 1924. By 1940, Russia had subverted Bessarabia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and other small island countries. By the middle of the 1940s, by using this red horse, this arsenal military supplied by the United States and European countries, Albania fell, the Kuril Islands fell, North Korea, the Ukraine, Yugoslavia, Tanyutuva, Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Czechoslovakia, then East Germany fell but was released back into West Germany. Then the greatest catch of all came by using United States war materials from World War II and some of the Japanese war materials that were captured by the United States and Russia. It fell in 1949. The red horse was on the march, galloping across the world. Satan had given power to it. Those who worship Lucifer were financing it. There's abundant evidence that the United States Department of State played a very significant role in the collapse of our staunch ally, Chiang Kai-shek, to prepare the way for Mao Zedong's overthrow of the most populated nation on earth, China. So the red horse of the apocalypse overthrew China, North Vietnam, North Korea, and on in the early 1950s, the red horse continued to march. Cuba in the Western Hemisphere was conquered for the red horse of communism by Fidel Castro with aid from the United States Department of State in 1960. The mass media controlled by the Council on Foreign Relations, who came into our government as advisors in the 1930s under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, socialist. And it's also a Marxist organization, said that they were fooled by Fidel Castro and they helped him to overthrow Cuba. Then he announced publicly that he was a communist. And so our own ambassador to there said that they knew many years in advance when he was held up into the mountains in Mexico and then over into Cuba that he was a communist and that our State Department was not telling the truth. By 1969, South Yemen was overrun for the red horse of the apocalypse, communism. In the 1970s, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Angola, Madagascar, Laos, Cambodia, and Grenada had all fallen into the hands of communism, the red horse of the apocalypse. Iran and Iraq in the 1980s and other Arab countries leaned toward communism, were supplied militarily by Russia so that they could create turmoil in the Middle East. So the red horse was given a great, massive military arsenal. And that military arsenal has been used against the world ever since. Then came Rhodesia on the African continent, Zimbabwe today, Congo. Congo was divided up into 5 segments. One of them was ruled over by a professing Christian who did not want to be communist. So the United Nations, which was formed, ordered troops to go in and crush him and force them into a communist coalition. The United Nations has now taken up the gauntlet, aiding and abetting international communism with support from the United States of America. We support the United Nations with more money than all other nations combined. Then Mali fell Guyana. The Union of South Africa was forced into submitting to the Red Horse of the Apocalypse. Libya, which had been long in bed with Russia, supplied. Gaddafi headed it up. International terrorist networks. They received their training in Cuba in 1966 and went back and had 23 terrorist training camps in Libya to overthrow nations for the Red Horse of the Apocalypse. They were working on Liberia right now as this taping took place. To overthrow it, civil war is raging. Other African nations have fallen so that it's nearly complete. The Red Horse of the Apocalypse sent their terrorists all over South and Central America. But where were these men trained? On a military base in Georgia. That's USA. And because of the uproar, they changed the name of it. San Salvador fell. Chile, Venezuela, Guatemala, and Central America is on the verge of collapsing. Then we have many people who are missionaries in Mexico and say the communists march openly in the streets. Chinese communists have been in Central and South America training the overthrow of countries there. Then on December 31st, 1991, total control of the Panama Canal and basically the country of Panama was taken by Communist China. They were called corporations, but every business in China is state-owned. And they're supplied their money with the military, the people's military. So the communist goal has never changed. Total world government. Every one of us should understand these things. And as we look and we watch on the world scene, we recognize who it is that has been sponsoring, who has been giving the money, who has been allowing international communism to spread around the world. At first, it was just the United States and Western Europe, the international bankers. Then it became their organization called the United Nations Organization. Revelation 6, just verse 4 says, "And there was given unto him this red horse, a great sword. He was to take peace from the earth." Notice there was literature written years ago as to what was going on. One of them was entitled, "Why is the United States Building the War Machine of the USSR?" I'll just give some of the facts from that. But without American technology, they say, and the data that we could provide, the Soviets and all the communist world would not have vehicles in space. They wouldn't have missiles targeted at the United States. On April 13th, 1982, Senator William Armstrong delivered a very hard-hitting speech on the subject of East-West trade. Here's a little of what he said. According to Senator Armstrong, in just the years between 1972 and 1982, a 10 or 11 year span, the United States and other Western nations had sold the Soviet Union and its satellite countries more than $50 billion worth of sophisticated technical support equipment that the communists could not produce by themselves, so they had to purchase it from the West. This equipment, he said, has been used to produce nuclear missiles, tanks, armored cars, space satellites, and air defense radar to be used against the United States to make sure no invasions to overthrow communism. In addition, The Soviets at that time, as they were called, had been able to purchase entire factories designed and built by Western engineers from the United States and Western Europe. It was financed mostly by American and European international bankers. This is how the Red Horse of the Apocalypse has received its power. Much of the production of these factories was devoted to the manufacture of military transport, ammunition, and items for the communist war machine. Not to help the people, but to build this war machine that was given to them, to take peace from the earth and to kill any resistors to their movement. Even further, a huge portion of our staggering federal budget goes for defense spending. Think about this now. Without the money, the credit, the advanced technology, and outright military hardware that the United States has provided and continues to provide to Russia and China, they could not claim a strategic advantage militarily over the United States. But since they're ever building a larger arsenal, then we have to take tax money and burden the people in America and collect taxes to build more sophisticated weaponry ourselves. To where at one time we had enough nuclear weapons stockpiled in Russia and the United States to kill 100 worlds like the one we live in. All because of this great arsenal that was given to this red horse. Given by the West. Not any of us, but by those who make decisions in Washington, D.C. The United States has helped at very great expense to the American people to build the international communist empire into a military power capable of threatening the survival of the free world. To be exact, they continue to pretend that their army doesn't exist anymore. They're hungry. They can't fill a military. And at the same time, they are building at neck-break speed in the Ural Mountains, underground facilities, the most sophisticated nuclear-tipped missiles and bombs the world has ever seen. China is doing the same thing. Our spy satellites have seen it. But the people in power, the international bankers that control the economy of the United States, continue and continue to support the international communist movement. After all, they have stated within the last 5 years, if there were no communist threat, then there would be no need for a world government. And the American people would not support it. So they have to continue to have a communist threat that the extinction of the human race will take place. In 1973, Soviet dictator Leonid Brezhnev told his Politburo and leaders of the Warsaw Pact, other communist countries, I'm quoting, "We communists have to go along, string along with the capitalists for a while. We need their credit, that's money, their agriculture and their technology. But we're going to continue massive military programs. And by the middle of the 1980s, we'll be in a position to return to a more aggressive foreign policy designed to gain the upper hand in our relationship with the West." End of quote. What happened in the 1980s? Exactly what they said in the 1930s. 50 years later, they became friends, pretended to collapse. The greatest overture of peace that anyone had ever seen. And so the American people fell for it. Russia is no longer an enemy, a threat to our survival. So they continued to build their military in secret, receiving funds, trade, spare parts, technical know-how from the West. While the former Soviet Union have deployed more than 340 nuclear-tipped mobile SS-20 missiles that are within striking distance of Western Europe. And then the United States does nothing but diplomatically condemn them. They never threaten an invasion to destroy communism. To be exact, when that great World War II, General MacArthur wanted to go in and bomb and destroy communism so that it would no longer be a threat to the world, he was relieved of duty by a 33rd degree Mason president of the United States. So communism had to be on the scene. It had to be the threat. There had to be a red horse that would threaten the world, that would take peace from the earth so that mankind one day would throw up their hands and say, if we ever want to live in peace, we will subject ourselves to a world government. And that's what Lucifer's counting on. That the world will give up and world government will come. But big business to build their war machine has continued. It has not abated. It is continuing at the very moment that this taping was made. In a 1974 book by a man called Anthony Sutton called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, he said that one barrier to understand what is happening in the world today is that we in the West are capitalist. And we think that because we have a free society and marketplace, free economy, not controlled by the government, that we think all people, even the rich people, are against communism. He said, oh no, that's not the case at all. It's the rich ones who are financing communism because they don't want to just control America, they want to control the world. They want all the diamond mines, all the oil wells. They want everything, the tungsten and everything else. They want to control everything, and you and I be their manufacturing base to produce it for them. It's called slavery. That's what communism is. On January 16th, 1967, the New York Times reported that a man by the name of David Rockefeller went to China because China had rolled out the red carpet. President Nixon went there and he said, everything's fine. We're going to bring China out of the dark ages. We're going to start producing and having economic trade with them. And so it was that he began to show that the economic buildup in all the communist countries was linked directly to Wall Street. Multinational corporations from America, Great Britain, and the rest of Europe that are considered capitalist. He even began to name people and their corporations. And he said that one of those that is the most important are the Rockefeller brothers and their affiliated international corporations. He went on and named other people like Cyrus Eaton Jr., who he was a Cleveland financer. He headed up many, many escapades into the Soviet Union. He said that they had created a network called the Council on Foreign Relations so that they could capture the State Department, and all decision-making positions that would open up trade with the communist countries. This is called an invisible government behind the scenes. Nobody knows who it is that's making these decisions, but we blame the president for them, when he may not even know the ramifications behind it, possibly. He went on to say in his book that for several decades, members of the Council on Foreign Relations have held all of these key policy-making positions in the United States government. It didn't matter whether the Democrats were in power or the Republicans were in power. It just didn't matter. The Council on Foreign Relations was carrying out the same program to subject America to a red horse of the apocalypse, to take peace from the earth, and to create such terrible conditions all over the world that eventually even America, when that middle class disappears, will throw up their hands and want to be merged into an all-powerful world government, because they will have all the answers and we can't govern ourselves. So why has the Council on Foreign Relations pushed so long for increased trade with Russia? It's because it's tied to this power grab that has been going on in the United States by international bankers. They want to create a world government. They are a part of the Illuminati. They want to have all of this technology transferred to other countries around the world so that they can continue to be a threat to the United States of America. When dealing with Moscow, United States businessmen have to clothe all of their transactions in geopolitical theories. Now, what do I mean by that? They believe that the world will become interdependent. All countries will have free trade. So you can ship anything from the United States to Russia. Russia can ship anything to America. No tariffs. But there is a problem with that. That problem is the manufacturing base in America that made us the richest nation on the face of the earth, plus God's blessings. When you destroy the manufacturing base by someone making $20, $25 an hour plus benefits, that equals to $40 to $50 an hour, then you have a middle class that lives good. But when you have people in China that are in prison and they're working for 17, 25 cents an hour, 40 cents an hour, $1.20 an hour in Mexico, all of a sudden when the free trade opens, then you cannot charge tariffs anymore to make the playing field level. Therefore, their little cheap products come into America, and American manufacturers cannot produce and stay in business. Either they transfer their corporations to another area of the world, a third or fourth world country, because after all, everybody in the world's got to be equal opportunity. The third and fourth world countries has to have an equal opportunity with Americans. And so it's making the middle class disappear. This is going to be interdependence. All nations of the world interdependent one with the other. All no middle class. Just the upper class, some millionaires, the rulers, and then those who work to make the profits for the owners. This is why the red horse of the apocalypse is going out. To overthrow all governments, so that they can merge it into this new world order. Senator Armstrong, William Armstrong, said, and I quote, "Part of the blame for this sorry state of affairs rests with companies who value private profit above preservation of a free society that makes profit or private profit possible." End of quote. Anthony Sutton in his book said, I quote, "These American businessmen are no longer American in ideology. Explanations for these self-interested deals are in terms of global New World Order philosophy. End of quote. There is coming world government. Revelation 13 says so. But the red horse is the primary mover that is going to force it into existence. And it said someone had to supply the military personnel or the materials also, so the red horse can continue to ride over the earth. Mr. Stephen V. Cole, who wrote in the October 1982 issue of the American Opinion magazine, stated, quote, during the peak years of the Carter administration, some 60 U.S. companies had science and technology transfer contracts with Russia. Among them were Bechtel, that was then run by former President Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, George Shultz, and also Reagan's Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger. When people in such positions are in such authority, how can they not get what they want? When it has gotten to where 71% of the American people say they want us to come out of Iraq, it was a mistake to go there. And the president says, we'll stay the course. You can add to it, we haven't secured our oil interest yet. Reading between the lines. George Shultz and Caspar Weinberger were members of David Rockefeller's Council on Foreign Relations. Mr. Anthony Sutton puts out a Phoenix letter in the May 1982 issue. He told of some of the American firms that were involved in military-type transfer of our data to Russia. Here's what he said. American technology, Boeing, Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, Sikorsky aircraft are all trading with the enemy. They make airplanes. They make fighters. They have the technology. Automobile, truck, and agricultural equipment that has been transferred their technology to Russia. Caterpillar Tractor, Swindler Dressler Company, Rockwell International, International Harvester, Alice Chalmers. These have been transferring the ability for them to produce more agriculture. There have been whole plants transferred to Russia, built by Americans, trained by Americans, that have built trucks that have invaded other countries to overthrow them for communism. In the metal manufacturing industry, American Can has contracts with Russia. Kaiser Industries, Litton Industries, the machine tool business, General Electric, Sunstrand Corporation, Bryant Chuckin Grinder Company, Bendix Corporation, American Chain and Cable, and Allen Bradley Corporations. They're all doing business, supplying the technical know-how to the communist regimes. In the electronics industry, we have Honeywell Information Systems, Univac Control Data, IBM Raytheon, RCA Coma Corporation, and Hewlett Packard. So all of these are producing and manufacturing and giving to the red horse of the apocalypse the necessary knowledge and training them so they can go out and put pressure on the nations of the world to force us into a one-world government or never have peace in the world. Petroleum and chemical companies that are doing business with the Russians, there may be many more by now. Occidental Petroleum, and one of the top men in Occidental Petroleum was an outright communist. He was a roommate of Bill Clinton, former president, Derek Scherer, who wrote a book talking about economic democracy, how that they would eventually have all the socialist program in America in economics. And he hoped that it would be done during the presidential terms of the years 1990s. Didn't quite make it. Another company is Tenneco, Monsanto, Alcoa, and Dow Chemical all have contracts with international communism. Bankers and financial houses that do business with them. These are the ones that are building the red horse of the apocalypse so they can take peace from the earth and kill people of the citizens of the countries they overthrow. Chase Manhattan Bank, Irvin Trust, Satra Corporation, Tower International. These are just a few of them. To be exact, the very first bank by a foreign country that ever went into Russia was number 1 Red Square, Chase Manhattan Bank, who was headed up by David Rockefeller, head of the Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. After Nixon began to normalize relations with the Red China in 1971, David Rockefeller, who was the chairman of the board of the Chase Manhattan Bank, decided he would go to Communist China. Take a look. They rolled out a red carpet as he got off the plane and walked down it. Then he came back and he wrote a newspaper article for the New York Times. Here's what he said, quote, "The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history." End of quote. Obviously, he had forgotten about the 62.5 million people murdered and killed to institute communism on the Chinese people. He had forgotten about the probably 100 million in Russia and the satellite countries liquidated, starting with Lenin and basically Stalin, the most brutal of all of them. On June 16th, 1981, Secretary of State Alexander Haig completed a 3-day visit to Communist China. He came home announcing that the Reagan administration was prepared to sell offensive arms, including lethal weapons, to Red China. Alexander Haig just happened to be a member of the Council on Foreign Relations that had been working for world government ever since it was founded in 1919 and incorporated in 1921, and the founders were Marxist. On the same day, President Reagan stated that pending arms sales to Red China will become a normal part of the process of improving our relations with them. Who is it that is building the red horse of the apocalypse? Who is it that is playing a major part of fulfilling Bible prophecy, and they don't even know the prophecies are in the Bible? An article in the Weekly Review of the News, September 2nd, 1981, commented on the proposed arms for sale to Red China. It said, and I quote, "While it is now considered unfashionable by the mass media to group the Red Chinese into the enemies category with the Russians just because both are communist and sworn to destroy us, the sale of high technology weapons to the only country potentially able to force us out of the far Pacific does not seem to be very smart. The record of the Chinese Reds in breaking agreements at will makes any such sales seem outright lunacy." End of quote. Read Isaiah 1:1-7 sometime, where it says there will be no wisdom in the leaders. From the top of their head to the bottom of their feet, they will not be able to make a sane decision. But we know they are. There is design. There is purpose. That's why I gave the introduction to this message. As to who it was that was laying down the whole program and who's behind it. So that we can realize that our only hope is going to be the coming of Jesus Christ to overthrow this satanic system and the worship of Lucifer. But He has promised He will come. He will not delay when the right moment in time comes. Sometimes we become very discouraged because we wanted Him to be on this earth 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But we're talking about God's in charge, not us. We have to endure unto the end. Some will not. Some are already on the outside looking in. Others will also do that because they will not endure. Mr. John F. McManus, in a syndicated column dated February 4th, 1982, during the Reagan administration, while discussing selling of arms to Red China, he revealed that those weapons being shipped are improved Hawk ground-to-air missiles, improved Tau anti-tank missiles, armored personnel carriers, radar. And then he went on to say their advanced technical expertise that our government is going to supply. We would send those that could train them to use all of this equipment. A great arsenal was given to the Red Horse. It would go out all over the world and take peace from the earth and kill human beings. The arms that the United States shipped to Red China are supposed to thwart, back in the 1980s, this was the excuse, thwart any threat of Russia to China. But they have been friends for years. They're all communist. Notice what it said, a Reuters dispatch dated February 7th, 1982. It reported that a senior U.S. trade official had just said that Washington, and I'm quoting now, would consider selling to China sophisticated technology, including military equipment which is technically more advanced than the weapons that had previously offered to sell. End of quote. Why do they have all this equipment? Our capitalistic system. They said they're not enemies anymore. They're friends. So under the capitalistic system, they're to make a profit. So they'll sell to anybody, anywhere, at any time. The Red Horse. Past Chinese Communist leader Shou Enlai once said, and I quote, "If anything unusual happens, the Russians and Red China will stand shoulder to shoulder. Remember, both China and Russia belong to the communist camp." End of quote. Is there a Red Horse? Yes, there is. So with the United States helping to build the war machine of both of these, they are our mortal enemies. There was a UPI report on May 22nd, 1983, that U.S. Secretary of Commerce Malcolm Baldrige, when he was in Beijing, he said that a 30-member American delegation went there. They went there so that they could discuss the transfer of technology. The UPI report said this, quote, "The talks are expected to focus on the transfer of American high technology to China." End of quote. If that's not the Red Horse of the apocalypse in action, then it will never be in action. The red horse says that someone is going to give them a great arsenal. So the red horse is marching over the world, and it would not be able to march if it were not for the United States of America and certain European international corporations. Caterpillar Company is one of the companies that the United States is involved in with a transfer of technology. A UPI dispatch, October 1st, 1981, reported that 3 American companies are part owners of a firm negotiating to bring Russian natural gas to Western Europe. Now you think about this. Here is your enemy, Russia. They have their controls on the natural gas, the petroleum. They can turn it off at will if they don't like what you're doing, if you become a threat to them. Some of those companies were Exxon, Mobil, Texaco, of course, British Petroleum, and Royal Dutch Shell. And Royal Dutch Shell actually owns about 2/3 of Ruhr Gas, which is West German's utility, and yet they're all bargaining with the Kremlin over Siberian gas imports into Western Europe. When we know the communists break, just like Lenin said, promises are to be broken. They're like pie crusts. Phyllis Schlafly, who has watched the rise of international communism for years and years, writes a syndicated column that appears in many newspapers on August 12th, 1982, had this to say about certain key components of this gas pipeline. She said that the Russians could not make turbines that would work, but General Electric Company could, and certain West European firms that were licensed to help the Russians build their pipeline. And that without these turbines built by General Electric Corporation, Russia would not be holding the threat over Europe of turning off the gas. In this connection about the oil line that was pumped over into Western Europe out of Russia, Senator Jake Garn, G-A-R-N, said this, I quote, "The pipeline project is the largest east-west economic venture in history. It'll provide the Russians with a much-needed boost in foreign exchange earnings, help Russia maintain their control over Eastern Europe, bail the Russians out of serious energy and economic difficulties. It will expose West European banks to a heightened risk of financial ruin and grant Moscow large-scale economic and political influence over Western European affairs that could sap the vitality out of NATO." End of quote. Yes, Russia has their hands on this east-west oil venture. The American Opinion magazine of November 1981 had an article written by a William P. Hoare. Here's what he said about this pipeline. Quote, "In short, we're helping to make our allies dependent on our enemy for vital energy sources. Such are the ways of the New World Order that if Moscow elects to shut off the flow of fuel, Europe will freeze." End of quote. This is the way of the New World Order. There is a great arsenal that has been built. The Bible is accurate every time. Every time. The red horse of the apocalypse has been going out. It has been forcing nations into a one-world government. It's called socialism, communism first, and then the Western world. And they will merge them comfortably once they've destroyed the middle class in America. They've already done it in Europe practically. The European countries have been socialist for a long time. Britain was so socialist that finally one writer fled from Britain, went to Canada. It was so socialist he fled to the United States. He said, I've got nowhere else to go anymore. This is the last country, and now it's so socialist, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's the world, the New World Order, the red horse of the apocalypse that is racing over the earth. You know, sometimes we talk about double speak. That's the way the Russians do it. On December 29th, 1981, President Ronald Reagan said that the Soviet Union should bear a great responsibility for the repression that was going on in Poland. And so he said, we're going to put sanctions against the Soviet Union. We're not going to send them any more electronic equipment. We're not going to let anybody go over there and teach them how to use this equipment. This is to punish them for their repression of the Polish people. 11 months later, there was no change. Nothing had changed in Russia's repression of the Polish people. But he had given permission to the United States so that they could start resending exports to Russia, electronic equipment, computers, other high technology materials that they needed for their military arsenal. No telling of why it was done. The sanctions were just suddenly lifted. In discussing lifting of those sanctions, the Washington Weekly Human Events on November 27th, 1982 said, quote, "It's hard to believe that this act is anything but a major retreat paved by the Secretary of State George Shultz and one of his key aides, Larry Eagleburger." End of quote. Shultz and Eagleburger were both members of the Council on Foreign Relations, which has taken over as the invisible government of the United States. They wanted to capture the Foreign Department so that they could deal with foreign nations. They've done it for years and years and years. In a previously mentioned article by Senator William Armstrong, or his speech, that is, April 13th, 1982, it recalled that in 1972, while Americans were being killed, while Russians were building a military arsenal, that President Nixon had authorized the sale to Russia of 164 precision ball-bearing grinders. These were manufactured by the Bryant Chucking Grinder Corporation of Vermont. Why would that be so important? I mean, a few grinders, what do? Well, they only grind things to as much as a 1/25th of a millionth of an inch accuracy. This was exactly what they needed so that they could put multiple warheads on their intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they couldn't do it themselves. They didn't have the technology. So here our government gives it to them through trade. It's called credit. But you know what credit does? Russia has never paid any of its credit to the United States. Never. So that means it's an outright donation to the red horse of the apocalypse. Congressman William L. Dickinson, in an article on February 17th, 1982, in the Review of the News, he commented on these sales of these grinders, ball-bearing grinders. He said, quote, "As a consequence, Russian missile accuracy improved dramatically to the point where 90% of our land-based ICBM force can now be destroyed in a first strike. This was a technology the Russians did not have, which they bought for a cheap price and which endangers the lives of millions of Americans. End of quote. The red horse of the apocalypse. And most people read those two little verses in the Bible and skim right on past it, not even understanding what it means, because they haven't looked at world news in the light of Bible prophecy to find out, to fill in the blanks, to see why there is a threat to human survival today. And where do they get all of their money? But the United States of America also has furnished them with computers. The most sophisticated computers the world has ever seen built. The best Russian-designed computers back in the 1980s was called BESM series. They could perform about 500,000 operations per second. And yet, in the American Opinion magazine, October 1982, article by Stephen V. Cole, he said that American Cyber 73 computers were exported to Russia in 1978 that could perform over 4 million operations per second, 8 times more powerful. The United States, once again, has done it for the bottom line of profits. Cole also pointed out that the United States has sold silicon chip technology to the Russians, and that the last 2 generations of Russian ICBMs have United States designed microchips in their warheads. Very fascinating. Bible prophecy happening while the world rushes on. While the world doesn't understand, and the churches across America and Britain and the Western European community don't understand what they see on the world scene today. We do. God's Spirit, a part of the program for God's Spirit inside of a Christian's mind is to show them things to come. Understand the prophecies written down, inspired by Jesus the Christ of Almighty God. The Washington Times, a writer by the name of Bill Gertz, who had written a book. Now, he was a defense reporter for the Washington Times, and he had written a book entitled Betrayal: How the Clinton Administration Undermined American Security. He said that not only does China pose a national security threat to the United States, but that Beijing is building up military forces for other than regional security interest. He said that they are building their military to replace the United States in the Far East and beyond, because they are technically an enemy, just like Russia, and they have the same goal, same purpose of world government. And he discussed that in the Washington Times and in his book. He said that the Chinese have stolen design information on the United States' most advanced thermonuclear weapons, and they could incorporate it in the next generation in their ICBMs. He said that they have transferred ballistic missile technology, and then he's given it to Iran, Pakistan, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Libya, China's allies. He said that China has acquired some 600 supercomputers, some of which have been used and are currently being used in violation of United States export laws, because they're being used to develop weapons of war, which is illegal. He said that China has stolen United States missile guidance technology with direct applications for China's ballistic missiles, including short-range missiles and ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missiles. To be exact, they have about 900 down in the islands at each end of the Panama Canal that can go 900 miles to 1,300 miles. That can reach just about any city in the southern half of the United States of America. He also reported that China has stolen more than 3,000 corporations' patents in the United States, and that they can use these patents on their military. He said they can use them in their intelligence services, and without this technology, they would not be able to target American cities. He said the Chinese have stolen United States missile guidance technology that has direct applicability to its ballistic missiles and rockets. The stolen guidance technology is used on a variety of U.S. missiles and military aircraft. Now they have it on theirs. He concluded that a long-range missile fast enough to catch any combat fighter in the world is being developed jointly by Russia and China. And he quoted the British aerospace industry as his source for information. In conclusion and summary of the red horse of the apocalypse, Revelation 6, verse 3 and 4, was to fulfill three missions. Number one, take peace from the earth. I believe that I have shown from documentation that the one instrument that was designed to accomplish revolution was international communism, founded by the ultra-secret order of the Illuminati that was formed under Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria, Germany, May 1st, 1776. Also, that it was to kill mankind. I believe that I've shown that international communism's reason for existence requires massive murder of whole classes, the middle class, property owners, business owners. And third, that a great sword or military arsenal was given to it to accomplish these revolutions, taking peace from the earth and killing human beings. I believe that in this message that I have shown conclusively that the Marxist Council on Foreign Relations, which its members were invited in to become advisors to government officials by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1930s, and every president since then, has been ultimately responsible for the transfer of high technology to build the communist war machine. Former President Bill Clinton is a member of that organization. President George W. Bush is a member of Skull and Bones Secret Society. And every president has been a member of some organization since World War II that is designed to destroy the United States of America and merge it into an all-powerful one-world government. If we've understood the red horse, let's keep watching, because world news in the light of prophecy is what we're looking for, and we're looking for the return of Jesus Christ. It will happen more than likely in your lifetime. God bless you.